You're clean, aren't you? Except for your tower. You're a tower junkie, Roland.
Hello and welcome to Tower Junkies, presented by ObsessiveViewer.com. Tower Junkies is a podcast celebrating the work of Stephen King with a special focus on his magnum opus, the Dark Tower series. We discuss the themes, characters, and mythology of the series in Palaver episodes, and review the books and comic series in Kef episodes. We also discuss non-Tower King novels, TV and film adaptations of King's work, and the latest news about all things that serve the King. You can find more of our work at TowerJunkiesPod.com and follow us on every level of social media at Tower Junkies Pod. I'm one of your hosts, Matt Hurt, and with me today, as usual, is Tiny in isolation.
Yes, I am isolated.
Yes, as am I. So, Tiny, before we get into what we're actually talking about today, just to make sure our listeners know, we are recording this April 2nd, 2020, as the country and world is on lockdown from the novel coronavirus COVID-19. How you feeling? How's it going?
I'm actually doing okay. Feeling good. No symptoms at all. And still working and stuff. Work has slowed down. I don't know if eventually it's going to dry up, but yeah, still going out in the world. And it's actually been encouraging the past week or so, because there's a noticeably less people out and about. There's always going to be outliers and jackasses who don't take it seriously like they should. But it's been somewhat encouraging, especially downtown. Downtown Indianapolis is fairly lively at all times. And I went down there on a Saturday night and it was just dead. Nobody out, no cars. So yeah, it's actually kind of encouraging, because that's what's supposed to be happening.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I agree. It has been so for our day jobs. Tiny, you are an essential employee, and I am an essential employee at my job too. Mm-hmm. So for those in the future or those unaware, I don't know how, but if those are unaware, Indiana, the governor 2.5 weeks ago, I think, maybe going on 3 weeks. I don't know. Time is not a thing now. But the governor issued a stay-at-home order for all non-essential personnel. So the order is stay at home, don't leave, don't go anywhere unless you absolutely have to. So I absolutely have to once a week to go into the office and actually do work. Otherwise, I'm working from home. Check out Obsessive Viewer, our podcast, where I am doing what I'm calling COVID-19 Film Festival. So basically episodes that I am recording mostly by myself, talking about movies that I watch while trapped in my apartment during this whole thing. So anyway, it is encouraging. I do know that there are, like you said, outliers. And that's always a bummer because we want this to end, but people don't care. So,
yep.
Yeah, it's frustrating. But, there's a good segue here. Hang on. But let's not make the listeners feel down about, this, widespread illness that's infecting thousands and thousands and thousands of people per day and leading to the death of a lot of people and everything across the world. And what are we talking about today, Tiny?
We're talking about The Stand.
Yes, that was a terrible segue, and I hope that does not come across as me being insensitive. But anyway, we're talking about The Stand, where basically the idea for this, we originally had planned on doing, the plan has always been to cover The Stand, the novel, in 3 parts, one for each book section of the book. Give each of those 3 books, 3 sections, its own individual episode, and then do the 90s miniseries give it its own episode, and then like bank those, and then release them in the lead up to the miniseries on CBS All Access. That may still be the plan. I don't know, but I might also want to kind of have us release these episodes now, since the world is on fire, and I think it would be interesting to kind of chronicle our experience while we talk about The Stand.
Right. Yeah, we've been planning this for a while. The COVID-19 is an unfortunate coincidence.
Very.
For a second, I was about to say this is sort of serendipitous, but that's not exactly the right word, because this is not a desirable outcome.
It's Tiny. It's Ka.
It's Ka.
Yeah.
It is a wheel.
Yes. Yeah. Oh God. Anyway. Yeah. Scary stuff though. It is very scary and demoralizing. Really. Have you felt any of that, by the way? Like this. Like, have you felt any melancholy over it at all?
Yeah, somewhat. It's hard not to when you see some of the effects of this. Like, I genuinely read or see some of the healthcare workers.
Yes.
Read their accounts, and I don't know how they're not just curled up in a ball crying in a corner.
I agree 100%. And it's one of those things where, as people who listen to the Obsessive Viewer know, I went through a spell where I watched a lot of ER when it hit Hulu. And like, even then, like, I don't understand how people can do that type of work. Like that type of like triage stuff, or like being on the front lines of a medical emergency of any type. And we even talked about that when we reviewed, that sports medicine, or that auto racing medicine, rapid response on Obsessive Viewer. I don't understand. Like, I don't understand how those types of people's brains work, like just general. And like seeing it in action, or seeing like accounts of like the healthcare professionals that are literally saving lives every day while putting their lives on the line and their well-being on the line, just to stem the flow of just death and dismay that's flooding our hospitals and everything, is just, it's inspiring. And I can't fathom how people don't break down entirely over it.
I agree. They are truly, truly exceptional people.
Yes. I saw a video, and I'll try to dig it up and put it in the show notes of the episode, but I saw a video that was this woman who, she was a nurse or something, maybe a resident, I don't know, at a hospital in New York. And she's just basically going about her day, and like she's filming things, saying like, I don't care if I'm in trouble here, if I get in trouble for filming this, but people should know that this is what it's like right now. And it's like, it's unfathomable. Like it is insane. Like, she talks about how, like, and it's been widely reported, like they had to bring in like refrigerated trucks to store the bodies of the deceased, because there was no more room in the morgue.
Right.
And even like again in New York, like they brought a ship or something to have like as a fucking like hospital ship for space. And then you also have the fucking morons who watched it dock, or like they went to see it, ignoring the, social distancing and self-isolation stuff. It's just, it's fucking surreal. All of this is surreal.
It is very surreal.
Yeah. Yep. So I think the plan is that we're going to do our 3-part The Stand series of episodes, and they're going to be intermittent in terms of recording, but we're going to kind of chronicle where we're at maybe each time we reconvene for this review series. So right now it is April 2nd. The stay-at-home order in Indiana was enacted on March 18th. So I think it's like 16 days since then, right now. Yeah. And if you don't listen to Obsessive Viewer, just to put it into context, today's April 2nd. In Indiana, 3,039 positive cases of COVID-19 in the state of Indiana. There have been 78 deaths, and a total of 16,285 have been tested in the state of Indiana. And COVID-19 cases have topped 1 million worldwide, with more than 58,000 deaths, and nearly 209,000 people have also recovered from it worldwide. So those are some stats. Yeah. Yeah. Any comment on that, Tiny?
No, because that number is just going to keep. All those numbers are just going to keep changing, and
yeah.
I question how accurate they are, because I feel like there are tens of millions of people who have it right now and just don't know it, or they're asymptomatic.
Exactly. Like, it is. Like, those stats are just like the positive cases, or those are the positive cases that have come from testing.
Right.
And like, there are, like you said, thousands and thousands of people. And like, we reside in the county that has the highest amount, and granted, it's, you know, it's a big county and like populated county, but in the state of Indiana, the county we reside in has the most positively ID'd cases of COVID-19 in the state. So
by far,
yeah, by a very large margin. So yeah, that's that. What else? I thought there was something else I was going to say on that front, but I don't know. It's yeah, it has been very demoralizing and very just it's been rough. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. How to transition out of this?
For real.
I dug us into a hole. So The Stand, Tiny.
Yeah.
I don't have any real notes or anything for this, so this is going to be kind of something I probably shouldn't have said out loud on the podcast. But yeah, so Tiny, The Stand is a big one for King, obviously. It was originally published in 1978, and then it was revised and updated with the complete and uncut edition in 1990. So yeah. So Tiny, your history with The Stand.
This will be, I think, my fourth time through the book.
Nice.
It's at least my third. So my parents have, I'm glad you mentioned the two editions of it, because my parents, I think, have a first edition of the 1990 uncut or whatever, unabridged version or whatever it's called. Mm-hmm. And they still have it. And that's how I read the book the first time, was that copy that they have. And I bought my own copy very quickly and read that. So I have a physical copy of the book, but this is my first time through it with the audiobook.
Okay.
So that's a first for me, but I am a huge fan. It is a top 10 King book for me. I can't imagine it ever being outside of my top 10 because I really adore it. I think this is one of the most accessible books. I don't know if that's the right word, but it's one of those books where, like, if you're telling someone who's never experienced Stephen King to get into Stephen King, I think this is a good first couple books, or maybe even first book to start with. I mean, I just think it's because it's so it has so much character building in it, which is his sort of cornerstone as a writer and what he does best, in my opinion. And there's so many there's incredible world building. It's a very segmented story. It's broken up in a satisfactory way. So I think it's a good place to start, but yeah, that's kind of my opinion of it. I actually have it on my top 19 King novels. It's in my number 3 spot right now.
I was just going to bring that up. Yep.
It's probably going to be a top 5. Like, it's probably going to stay a top 5 unless he releases some incredible shit in the next however many years. But yeah, it's that good. It's one of his best, and I think it's going to stay that way.
Yeah. So very good. Did you say that you have read the original edition before it was updated and expanded and everything?
I never have. I've only read the full uncut version.
Okay, same here. It's interesting because the reason why that original edition exists is because the publisher was like, we've got to cut this down. Like, you need to come hacksaw like 800 pages or whatever, however many pages, I don't know. So it's not like it was the updated one was like, oh, we need to cash in on this. It's like, no, Stephen King's like, no, I want to put my babies back in the bassinet and release it to my nannies. I don't know. That kind of ran away from me.
That was a weird analogy.
It really was. But yeah, like my history, I have an interesting history with The Stand. I don't know if you will remember this, but back in, I want to say it was probably 2009 or maybe 2008 when you and I worked together. Do you remember me, you, and Mike doing a like book club thing with it? Do you remember that at all? I
do, and it lasted like 10 seconds.
It did lasted very shortly. Like was it
via email?
It was via email, which
yeah.
And like I remember,
for those in the future, email is a form of communication.
Yes.
It's a long tweet.
Right. Yeah, and that did not last long. I don't even think I read the book then. Like, I think I just stopped reading it when we stopped doing that.
Oh, really? Okay.
I think. Cause I don't know when I ended up actually reading it full on. Maybe it was around that time I did actually read it, cause I remember, like, I have memories of like where I was when I read certain parts of it, because Stephen King is to Stephen King is life. But yeah, I read it and liked it, and I've read it probably, I think this is maybe my third or fourth time. That's what I was gonna say. So when we did that, it was probably like 2007 to 2009 at some point, during that time frame. And I remember specifically that I tried to get so like fake analytical into it. Like, and I, like, this is embarrassing for me, but who cares? I wanted to pick apart every little, what's the word I'm looking for? Like every similarity, or like every, like I was reading it as if it were like some big mystery thing. And like, I distinctly remember saying like, wow, he's referred to Larry Underwood as a prince like 3 times. Like, what does that mean? And it's like, it's a figure of speech. It doesn't really mean anything. But the reason why I did that, Tiny, was because at the time, and one of the reasons why I was so interested in even reading the book in general, at the time, you and I were huge fans of Lost. And
we were.
Yes. And that's how the internet treated Lost for 6 years. And like, I was like, cause I'd heard that, I think Damon Lindelof or Carlton Cuse or someone on one of the DVD special features on Lost, they were like, oh, we have a copy of The Stand in the writer's room at all times. And it's like, there are clear like similarities, like, or influence from The Stand in Lost. Like, it's very obvious that Charlie, Pace in Lost is pretty much patterned to an extent, patterned by or patterned with Larry Underwood in the book. So
yeah.
And just like little things here and there. But yeah, it's anyway, so I read it, and then I've read it a couple of times. I've listened to the audiobook once, and this is my second time listening to the audiobook. So
nice.
I will say that it was bizarre for me, like as an anecdote, to go back to the COVID-19 stuff. One of the first, I think it was like the day before the stay-at-home order went into effect. So it was like Tuesday the 17th, or maybe it was earlier than that. I don't know, when the stores were getting hit hard with people going to stock up and everything. before everything was shutting down and everything. I went to my local grocery store and I was going through the aisles. I was picking up some essentials and picking up like just to stock up and everything. The entire time I had my headphones in and I was listening to the audiobook for The Stand. Because it was like after work, I like had been listening to it in the car on like in the car, like not with headphones, but in the car's radio. And I just continued listening to it and I was just like, and it was part of book 1 of The Stand where I was basically like listening to the virus, the super flu. I was listening to Captain Trips infecting the world as the world around me is like desperately grabbing as many foods and stuff to stock up for quarantine. So that was maybe one of the top 3 like most bizarre Stephen King related moments of my life.
Yeah, for real. That's weird. I finished book 1 like back in late January or early February, so it was before it ever got to the US and like it was still isolated to China, I think. I don't even think it had gotten beyond the Chinese borders when I was finishing book 1. So but it was still there was still a lot of talk that this was going to turn into a pandemic, a global pandemic, and like I was like, this is still highly poignant and topical for what's going on in the world right now, and it's like I said earlier, it's unfortunately coincidental.
Yeah, it is. And minor nitpick, the internet has like one of the things that I don't like about the internet and everything is like anytime something happens and something is coincidental in art or fiction of any kind, there's always like a post or like an essay that's like, did so-and-so predict this thing? And it's like, no, they didn't. like a headline I saw was, I think someone said like, I don't think they said like, did The Stand predict coronavirus? But it was like, I think it was like Stephen King was like Stephen King says, no, he didn't invent coronavirus. Like it's a different thing, in The Stand. I don't know. That's just something that gets on my nerves. Like, did The Simpsons predict this and this? It's like, no, The Simpsons has been on for 3 decades. Like there's going to be coincidences and stuff.
Right.
I don't know. Anyway, that's my soapbox. But yeah, so it's been a weird time listening to the audiobook for The Stand, and it's been interesting to revisit it though. And we are in this episode just going to talk about book 1 of The Stand, which is the title is book 1, Captain Trips, June 16th to July 4th. Which also, I thought it would have been cool if we released like this episode on June 16th and then the next episode in this series on July 5th, because book 2 starts at July 5th and then book 3 September 7th. Anyway, that's stupid. But anyway, so yeah, book 1 of The Stand. It's essentially the introduction to all or most of the major players of the story. And it's kind of told in vignettes, like different characters. They some of them intercut with one another, but it's mostly like these characters experiencing the outbreak of the super flu and surviving it. And yeah, so let's get into it. So Tiny, tell me, book 1, how did you feel about the first third of The Stand?
It's terrific. I mean, I love it. The just sort of tracking the virology of the virus is super fascinating. Which is kind of the main plot of the first book. But it's also just so much setup, which setup can be laborious and boring and uneventful, but this is not that by any means. It's, and I think Stephen King does set up so well. He paints a picture beautifully, and he gives you well-rounded characters and outlines their characteristics and their mannerisms and everything so beautifully that it doesn't feel like setup. It's not a chore, right? And The Stand is one of the best examples of that. He takes, I mean, it's long. It's probably 300 plus pages. I mean, it's a book in and of itself,
It's like something
and I mean
42 chapters, I think.
What's that?
It's like 42 chapters total, I think.
Yeah. I mean, that's huge. That's a whole book. So, I love it. It's really interesting to see how, since this is my third or fourth time through it, I know how it ends and where everyone ends up and what happens. This is why it's so fun to revisit these stories, is because you sort of forget where everybody started, and the changes they go throughout the book are just really drastic in some cases.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
And that's why it's so fun to come back to the beginning, and that's why the detail involved in the first act is so satisfying to a return reader. I love it. I mean, you're going to hear me say that so much because this book is so well done and just has so many things in it that I like. That it's going to feel like a lot of gushing. Not to say that there aren't issues with the book, but it's just so well done. It's hard to do anything other than gush over it.
Oh, I totally agree. And should we establish that we're going to be spoiling it, or should we do separate spoiler sections?
I think we should just go ahead and spoil it. I mean, it's been out for 40 years.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, so going forward in this review series for Tower Junkies, we are going to be spoiling The Stand. I think since we are segmenting we're structuring it as 3 reviews for one full book. It'd be good to kind of read along with us, I guess. So so for this review series, we're going to do spoilers on. So having said that, like you said, I agree completely, and I feel like that's going to be kind of an interesting experiment for this project because we're going to be agreeing a lot, I think. So this, like you said, the virology of the virus, like the way that it kind of infects the world. Like he has this passage or this whole section of the story where it's just outlining Captain Trips infecting, like how it's spread and everything. And there was, in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, he tweeted a clip from the audiobook on a YouTube link that is just basically that whole section. And like I had retweeted it, and I was like, to date, this is one of my favorite passages in all of Stephen King's work. Like, cause it is so just casually terrifying. And I don't want to say maniacal because it's not like a supernatural thing. It's just, this is how the virus is spreading, and it's killing, like it's decimating most of the human race. And it's kind of just casual. And it's just kind of like this woman just touched a car doorknob and now her whole family's dead because it spread. Like it's just, I don't think that's an actual example from it, but that's the basic thing. And I just love the way that his prose takes us through that whole section of the story. Even if it is just culling like the population for to set the stage for the tale of dark religion, as he puts it in the foreword, I think. That's come to play in the other portions of the book. But that's one of my favorite things that Stephen King's ever written is that infection section. Followed closely by the Lincoln Tunnel scene.
Right.
There's so much good in this section of the book, and I think part of that is, I think 'cause it's very much endemic, I think that's a word, of the way that King writes. Like it's a pretty good microcosm for King's style, and it's that those three sections. Like, he has separated The Stand into three sections. Part 1 is the setup. Part 2 is the more, my memory of it, at least, we'll talk about it soon, in an upcoming episode, but, it's more just living with these characters and pushing the plot forward. And then book 3 is more the, like, okay, he's had his fun, he's put his work in, now he just needs to end it. And sometimes, or a lot of times, people don't really connect well with the way that he ends it. So, I feel like The Stand as an entire work is a good indicator of Stephen King's overall style and the trappings he falls into and the things that make him one of the great storytellers of our time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, but we'll get to all that later. Book 1 though, the setup is just, it's wonderful. Like, we get such insight into all of these characters. Stu, Larry, oh my God, what is her name? Fucking Molly Ringwald in this mini. Franny. Why did I blank on her name? Harold, and like we get some very rich characters and very rich character setups. And yeah, how did you feel about all the character setups and everything?
They're really great. I love how spread out everyone is, and the simplicity of the characters, really, like there's also a pretty good spectrum of characters too. So, like, Franny is this 20-year-old girl, but she's sort of an old soul, kind of wise beyond her years in a way, and she's a mature 20-year-old girl. And then you have the exact opposite in Harold Lauder.
Yes.
Very immature 16-year-old boy. But then a character as unique as Nick Andros.
Yes.
Just sort of making his way through the world despite all the obstacles he has to overcome. And sort of thriving isn't the right word, but finding a way to make it through this crisis. When he really has no business doing so with his disabilities. Stu Redman, I say it all the time, the everyman, the ordinary guy, he's literally, it's not like he's just sitting there watching people die. Like, he's thrown into the absolute eye of the storm, being picked up by the government and the military and being studied like a lab rat, and that's what's so cool about this particular everyman or ordinary guy, is that he's right off the bat. His hometown is almost the epicenter for this disease, or it's one of the first places that it comes to. And he's one of the first people to be discovered to be immune to it. And so as a result, he's just thrown into he's a gas station attendant who's kind of a loser, frankly. And just the fact that he's thrown into this extraordinary situation is so wild. And then just to add to the diversity, the trash can man, again, just who the hell creates a character like that? That's just so, it's really, really out of left field. And like, I feel like being people who've read it before, we know that he's ultimately a nefarious, on the bad side, kind of a bad guy, but he's a bad guy because he's kind of crazy. Like, he didn't get the help he needed when he was younger, and he's sort of a victim in a way. And so, like, you empathize with him to an extent because he's just sort of caught up in all this, and he's kind of like an addict, and he's got all these problems. He needs help. He really needs help, but he never gets it. And as a result, he ends up on the bad side of all this. And that's what makes him really interesting. But it's so easy to just look at his character and be like, he's a bad guy. He's a pyro psycho guy who's got tons of problems and he just needs to be locked away. And it's like, it's easy to make that distinction, but I think he has a lot more depth than that, which really comes out in the next two books. But yeah, it's just the diversity of the cast of characters that he creates is like one of the most dynamic casts in all of his works. I mean, it's really incredible.
I totally agree with you. And it is like Stu Redman is like the quintessential Stephen King character. Like he is a character that could have his own novel that's just him doing his thing. And that's also somewhat an indicator of the rest of the book and the rest of the cast is that each of the characters are really pretty well realized across the board, and they are on such a spectrum of just like craziness and out there-ness. Like Stu Redman exists in a book that the Trash Can Man exists in as well, and it is so it adds to just the sprawling nature of the book itself. Like we have a cast of like thousands that is just scattered. Like and then they come together in unique ways, and they kind of like there's in book 2, they build a society and everything. And it's really, sprawling is the word that I keep coming back to. And it is one of King's greatest achievements in terms of his writing is that he's created this landscape of just completely counterbalanced and completely different people that work together and against one another in unique ways. And that's what makes The Stand one of the most endearing and fascinating books of King's career. And also, I forgot to mention earlier, it's my number 9. And I feel like going through it this time, I think that's going to change. I think it's going to jump up quite a bit, I think.
Nice. We didn't mention Larry Underwood either, which he's he's very interesting because he sort of comes off as a somewhat, I don't want to say villainous character, but sort of he has negative connotations to him. And it's because he's just very, very selfish.
Yes.
He's a very selfish character, but he's not like evil or bad. And it's fun. Again, it's just fun to explore his origin again, coming back to the book because I know how he ends up. But yeah, it's like he's just another example. I didn't want to. There's a lot of Larry Underwood in book 1. I mean, he's one of the more followed characters, so I didn't want to continue on without mentioning him as well. But yeah, his evolution is obviously fantastic to experience.
Yeah, even just his evolution in just book 1 itself. Like he goes from being this washed up. He's at the height of his career, sadly, because it's a one-hit wonder. And then he goes through his downfall, and like he has to come back, and he stays with his mom, and that doesn't go well. The super flu happens. Like he hooks up with is it Rita? And like
I think so.
Yeah, and she just like I love that pairing because she is so borderline, like it's almost like she's infantilized, if that's the word I'm looking for.
Yes.
She is so dependent on Larry, and that's a total drag for him.
Right.
And it's like it's this thing that I don't think King ever really explicitly states it, but it's this idea of like, should you carry on that dead weight? Like,
right.
Like she is going to get him killed. And it's just, it's a fascinating kind of crossroads that he puts the character in the first third of the book. Like it's insane. I love it.
Yeah. They're a fun pairing because he's very selfish and I think his mom refers to him as a taker. Like he's very much a taker.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Rita is not selfish and a taker, but she's very needy. She needs a lot. And those two people do not work together. They need givers in their lives, and neither of them have that capability. And so, yeah, they were destined to just fall apart and burn out.
Yep. I love her end. And I love Larry's reaction to her death, because she's in the sleeping bag and she's dead, and he's thinking about fucking her before he realizes oh wait, she's dead. She's laying there dead, and he's freaking out how long was I laying there, and oh my god, I was thinking about going and having sex with her before I realized oh my god. I don't know. I thought that was a really interesting portion of the book.
Yeah, and in a way, Rita's sort of a catalyst for the beginning of his evolution, and I think that's pretty important that happened so early on. I
agree completely. And let's talk about the Lincoln Tunnel also while we're talking about Larry. That section, it's so just chilling. It's a very chilling moment in the book, because it's just him going through a tunnel that is just death incarnate. What stands out to you about it? How do you feel about it? How did you find it this time?
It's so immersive. You feel that passage. You really feel it as a reader, and that's such a skill as a writer to pull that off and make your audience feel that. You feel the damp tunnel, and you feel like you can smell the death, and it's like the darkness is touching your skin, and because I think the reason partly why it works so well is that all of us have been in an environment like that for the most part. Most of us have been in a shitty basement that's not. It doesn't have a dehumidifier or whatever, and it's damp and it's cold and dark and it smells musty and weird. And that's what I picture, and that's what I experience whenever I read that passage. And it sends chills down your spine. It's one of the most memorable parts. And it's you hear shit that's not actually there because your senses are heightened because it's so dark and shit like that. And I think it's so well written and so well done that I would say it's in the second or third place behind Danny going into room 237 in The Shining, which I think is still the epitome of creepy Stephen King writing. I think that's as good as it gets. That will live with me forever. But this is up there.
Yeah.
The Lincoln Tunnel is up there.
And if I could be a dick, it's 217. You said 237.
I always make that. I can never remember which it is.
Do you want to know how I always remember? How the mnemonic device that I have for it? It's 217 in the novel because 2 plus 17 is 19.
Wow, look at you.
I know. Yeah.
Fucking Stanley Kubrick had to ruin everything.
I know, right? Well, technically, I think the Stanley Hotel probably did. Because I think, wasn't the story that the Stanley Hotel was people would come? No. The hotel where they filmed it at. Where Kubrick filmed it. I don't know where it was, but they didn't have a room 237, but they had a room 217, and if they had room 217 in the movie, people would bother them about room 217.
Right. Yeah, I think that's the story. That's
anyway,
how it goes.
Sure. Look it up on Wikipedia. Anyway. Yeah, I agree with everything you said about the Lincoln Tunnel scene. In that, we've talked about how you and I used to be security guards. We worked nights together, and I'm not ashamed to admit I was, and probably still am to a small extent, fucking terrified of the dark, and especially in our job when we worked security, we would have to walk around an empty building at night where the lights weren't on and everything, and that was legitimately just terrifying to me. I would hear things in my head, and it would be fucking terrifying to me. So when I read or listen to the Lincoln Tunnel scene, I am taken back to nights where I was walking an empty building, being terrified of something in the shadows and everything, just like Larry Underwood is as he's walking through the Lincoln Tunnel. And granted, I never walked on top of dead bodies or anything.
Yeah.
But it always takes me back to it. It's a weird nostalgic connection that I have to it. So, but yeah, the way that it's written, King has maybe, I would say it ranks up there with 217 also. But King has maybe never been more scary for me.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's just, it's terrifying. It's really good. Yeah. So, let's talk about Franny and Harold. First of all, the introduction of Franny Goldsmith is, again, another kind of quintessential Stephen King characterization. She's an every person character. She is a conduit for us to, she's to empathize with her and her situation. She's pregnant. She has her own, idea. She's her own individual person who is combating, her family and the different choices that she has to make and everything. It's a very interesting and good characterization and character development for her and introduction as well. To the point that I was it's heart-wrenching when her dad dies and she has to bury him. It's tragic. It's sad. It's depressing. Yeah. And then Harold enters the scene. How do you feel about this pairing and Franny and Harold in general?
Yeah, it turns out to be a very satisfying pairing. There's a lot of comic relief there, and I can't help but think about where it goes because we know what Harold turns out to be.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think Franny's just also, she's just so lovable. I think she's kind of like an idyllic girl. She's very idyllic girl next door. She's very attractive, and she has this very, very fun quality about her where she sort of finds comedy in inappropriate situations. She's having this very serious heart-to-heart with her boyfriend fling at the time, telling him that she's pregnant. And she has this moment where she has to stifle laughter at something completely inappropriate. And that happens more than once throughout her introduction. And that's just I find that very attractive, I guess, that quality in a person. And she's just very, very lovable. And to see someone as annoying as Harold thrust upon that kind of person, it's just damn it, what?
It's unfair.
It's like that poor freaking girl, And then of course at the end of, literally the last scene of book one is, them meeting Stu.
Yeah.
And immediately Harold and Stu are at odds. And just to throw a wrench in that scenario is just so fun. And it, throughout book two, it's very entertaining to see and read about Stu getting under Harold's skin and how they're at odds and Harold's master plan falling apart, and stuff like that. It's entertaining, and then where it ends up is obviously not so funny, but I don't know. It's just great storytelling again, and I love the pairing because there's a lot of comic relief in it amongst all this horror and tragedy, and it's just fun. It's fun to read. I always loved the juxtaposition of Harold and Franny. It's been one of my favorite parts of the book ever since I first read it.
Me too. And so to speak on real quick, just the end of the book, the section, that I wouldn't call it a cliffhanger, but the way that it ends with Harold and Franny meeting up with Stu, and Stu talking Harold down, sizing him up and realizing oh, this guy is a threat. He's not, he thinks that he owns her, and he is not, he's a liability and everything. He's not safe. But then him talking Harold down, like setting him aside and saying like, "Hey, I'm not in to intrude on anything. Like it's like, you know as well as I do. A man has needs, but his hand can take care of it just as well as a woman can." Just like things like the way that he just talks him down, and then like that last line where it says something like I'm not gonna fall in love with her or anything, and then like the last line is like Stu was lying, or Stu had no idea that he was lying, or whatever.
Right.
Setting up this triangle that's just so interesting. And to kind of go back to the beginning of the section, of the beginning of the portion of the book, the introduction of Harold is so unnerving and creepy in a predatory kind of way. And not in the traditional sense where it's like he's not like a predator that he's like outright going to like do like physical harm against her, but it's more so that he's so unadjusted socially that like it sends kind of shivers through me whenever he calls her my child. And it's like, it's just like, I think when I was younger, I would read that and think like, that's funny, he's an idiot. But it's like, now that I'm older, I'm like, oh God, oh God, that's just unnerving. It's unsettling in a very, intrusive way. And
yeah, it's unsettling because in a normal situation, he wouldn't get away with it.
I agree, my child.
But because of the circumstance where they're the last two people that they know of,
yep.
It's like she doesn't have any choice. That's her only option for social interaction. So he can basically just get away with, obviously he can't like, physically harm her or, take advantage of her physically or whatever, but he can get away with creepy ass shit because.
And it's his warped way of establishing dominance and failing also, because like I love when she calls him out where she's like, cut the my child shit, I'm 3 years older than you or whatever. Like she actually says like it's physically impossible for me to be your child. But it's just this weird thing where it's like this is the new world that they live in, that this guy who is by all accounts socially unadjusted and deranged, and he has the kind of the flaw of Harold as a character is that he has this hubris, he has this delusion of grandeur that he is meant for some higher purpose, or that he is smarter than everyone else that he encounters, and that's a dangerous attribute to have, because it can be manifested in a way that makes him unstable and what's the word I'm looking for? Unpredictable and irrational, which I think is summed up really well with his scene with Stu at the end of book 1, because Stu is kind of just completely aware of who and what Harold is. It's really good.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's talk about God. Wow, what is his name? The criminal. Lloyd.
Lloyd Henry.
You're listening to Tower Junkies, a Stephen King podcast. Let's talk about Lloyd Henry. He is one of the other like big parts of the book that really sticks out to me every time I read it is the scene where he's trapped in jail, and or is it prison or jail? I don't know, but
jail.
He's in jail, and he is like I think he either nibbles on or thinks about eating his the person in the cell next to him, and like just the despair and the kind of depth of just horror that he is experiencing just by being just left alone in this empty place with no hope of rescue is just so. It's the tone is just so dark and bleak. How did you feel about that and about Lloyd Henry as a character as well?
Yeah, it's very unsettling. His journey, or especially once he's in jail and the virus really takes hold. I love the self bargaining that he goes through with the cannibalism, because it's so logical. Like, you can totally track how a person would get there. You know, we would all like to think if we were in a dire situation like that, we would not eat, you know, but when you go through this experience with Lloyd and you follow his logic, you completely understand how he gets there and why he makes that decision despite how horrific it is. And I love that progression, the way that tracks. Just again, beautiful writing. But I also sort of like the his attitude where he's kind of like distancing himself, or sort of, what's the word I'm trying to think of? Kind of like making excuses for his situation. Like, he knowingly participated in these horrific crimes. Yeah. And he didn't kill anyone, but he also doesn't feel bad about anybody he never felt bad about anybody being dead until he got caught and was looking at the death penalty and stuff like that. That's when he started to feel remorseful. It's very selfish. Totally. So yeah, he's obviously just a bad guy from the get-go. There's no conundrum there as a reader whether or not you like this guy. There's no back door into empathy for this guy. You know, it's sort of like the trash can man. He's just a bad dude. But he's going through something absolutely horrific that I certainly wouldn't wish on anyone. And, you know, whether or not you believe in the death penalty, that's neither here nor there. I'm not a fan of it myself. But like, just it's not right for someone to sit there and watch someone starve to death. And like, it's not, no one should have to go through that. That's just a horrific thing. And it culminates beautifully by Randall Flagg capitalizing on that vulnerability at the end. And that's sort of he's mentioned up to that point, but he has no characterization up to that point. Right. We don't get dialogue from him or anything like that. But this, it's not in the same arena as this, but it sort of reminds me a little bit of the end of book 1 of The Dark Tower, where Roland and the Man in Black have their little palaver. That's one of my favorite scenes in all of Stephen King's writing. And this is not that. Obviously, it's one of the same characters, right? Yeah. But it has some similar themes, and it has some of the similar feel to that. And it's just some wonderfully evil exploitation going on.
Absolutely. And real quick, Lloyd Henreid, when he is in the jail cell, he talks about I'm gonna mention a hypothetical to you, and I'm already gagging at the thought of it, so you should know my answer ahead of time. But he talks about how he ate a cockroach. Do you think, if you were in that position, do you think you would get to that point where you would need, or you would think that the protein gain from eating would be worth it?
I really cannot see myself doing it, because I would be so afraid that it would make me puke. And if you're already starving and dehydrated and you try to eat a cockroach and it makes you puke, well, you're doing more damage than you are good. And so that's my logic there to try to get through that answer. But I will make the sort of default answer that I have no idea how I would react if I were that hungry and that desperate. I don't know.
I love that you went the logical route, because my you're like, oh, I think that, if I were to eat it and throw it up, then I'd be even more dehydrated and it wouldn't be good scientifically and everything. And like my reaction is like, I wouldn't do it because it's yuckers.
Yeah, I can't stand bugs. Like, they just freak me out and just gross me out. And so for that reason, obviously I wouldn't do it, but I don't know. It's hard for me to put myself in that scenario. Like, when he eats the rat, I'm like, I can see myself eating a rat. Like, that's awful. And I obviously don't want to do that, but I can. Yeah. So,
yep.
That's my answer.
Yeah. Same. So, Randall Flagg, the walking dude, the Dark Man, how did you feel about book one? His very slow burn introduction hinting at him.
It's just great. It's I love how Stephen King leaves a lot of mystery to him up until that the last, I don't know, 50 pages or whatever, when he interacts with Lloyd and makes the proposition with Lloyd in the prison. I love how kind of cat and mouse it is, and sort of he's still mysterious. Like, there's no mystery over whether or not he's the bad guy, but you just don't know to what extent, like how bad he is, until he reveals himself and starts to make this proposition to Lloyd. That's when it really just jumps off the screen and you're like, oh, this is a bad dude.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of his choices regarding the primary villain. Mm-hmm. In the first book, it's very subtle.
I totally agree. It's a good, it's good setup. It's good, like, setting the stage for, not even setting the stage. It's more setting the scene for the stage that we're going to be introduced to in book two.
Yep.
I love the way that he structures it and everything. A character we forgot to mention, Glenn Bateman, makes a very small appearance, and along with the doggy Kojak. I love that character so much. He's this sage older guy who has such wisdom about just the social constructs of humankind. I love his wisdom and everything. So I don't know. I just thought it was a good introduction. Did you have anything to say about that?
Not really. I agree with that. I always loved his breakdown of like an apocalyptic scenario.
Same.
That was just it's just the logic of it, and the way he parses that out is so brilliant and clever. And yeah, I remember that from the first time I read the book. Yeah,
same here. It always stands out for me. Always the stands out. I did want to mention that I didn't keep track as diligently as I could with other Stephen King references and stuff, but one did stand out to me. Did you catch this? That in, like, I don't know when it was, but so Franny wakes up and finds Gus reading a paperback that it's referred to as a Western by that woman in Haven. It's a reference to the Tommyknockers and the main character whose name escapes me. Sorry, pizza. Yeah. So I like that. It's just a small little interconnectivity and everything.
Oh man, I didn't pick up on that.
Yep. Well, I just scared pizza. So yeah. So is there anyone that we forgot about or didn't mention?
Well, we didn't really talk about Nick Andros.
We didn't. No, I keep forgetting. He's one of my favorite Stephen King characters.
And it's because he really amps up in the second and third stories. I think that's why. I forgot that he does not meet Tom Cullen in book one. I thought he did.
Yeah, same here. Yeah.
Completely forgot about that, because that's when he really, his inner monologue really takes off, I think, because once he has more interaction.
Where the Yeah, and where that interaction is so fragmented too is where he
has to take lead.
Exactly. He does the heavy lifting there.
Right. But yeah, he's an awesome character, and just the fact that he's had so much controversy and hardship in his life, and every day is a struggle for him. It's like a crisis like this. He's kind of made for a crisis like this because his life has just been so hard that
he's had
it's right. It's great to see. Yeah, it's great to see his character thrive, even in such tragedy. Yeah,
absolutely, and the compassion that he has throughout it, like just the overall compassion that the character has, like he's compassion embodied essentially. It's such great writing, and it's a great inclusion to the rest of the cast too. Like he rounds out the cast in a really good way in terms of just having that compassionate kind of energy and that kind of methodical energy too. Like he's a very I almost said soft spoken, but he's a very kind-hearted and thoughtful person. And putting him up against the things that he gets up against is pushed up against. I don't know. The things that he is up against is just, it's daunting, and it is great characterization that he rises above all of that conflict and adversity. There you go. Yeah. So yeah, I love his character. We'll talk much more in depth in part 2 about Nick Ambrose, but yeah, he's one of my favorite Stephen King characters.
Yep.
Anyone else? Anything else?
No, I don't think so. We covered it pretty well.
I think so too. Especially for not having really any notes. So overall thoughts on this, your third, fourth, fifth, whatever reading of The Stand. How do you feel? Kind of closing thoughts. How do you feel book 1 is in setting the stage for the story to come? Again, it's just great, and I'm loving it just as much as all the other times I've read the book.
I also, before we go, I sort of forgot that there's no mention of like the journey or like the kind of team up that happens in book 2. There's no mysticism. There's no supernaturality really in this first book.
There's a little bit, like the dreams. Yeah.
Are there dreams though in book 1? I don't remember.
Yep. They have dreams. Like it's very much like steeped in mystery and everything. It's like they like. I don't remember who it is. Like several of the characters have dreams of the cornfield in Nebraska, and I think maybe Stu has a dream about Mother Abigail.
In book 1? I don't remember that.
Oh yeah.
I must not have been paying attention during that part or something.
Yeah, it's a bit here and there, but it's more just setting the scene and setting up the dreams and everything to come.
Okay. Well, I'll retract that then. I guess I don't know. I don't know. I was thinking that was pretty much absent from book 1, but
it's not. By no means is it the focal point or anything. It's
right
about the characters. And one final thing, one thing that I really, I kind of always forget about this section of it, but late in the section, late in book 1, King doubles down on his outbreak section. Basically, he has a section that always stands out to me that he says, like, a couple weeks after Captain Trips decimated the population, a second outbreak occurred. And, like, he goes through this passage of just random characters that it's essentially like, it's people who have survived the plague, but cannot survive and do not survive just by happenstance. Like, there's a character who is immune from Captain Trips, but she's terrified of all men, and she has a gun, and some guy approaches her, and she fires the gun, and it explodes in her face because it's never been cleaned and everything. And and there's like a drug addict that gets someone's stash that makes them overdose and everything. It's just like little things like that, and like a guy having a heart attack after running, I think. It's just like it's so like it's an interesting if I'm to attempt a sports metaphor, it's like and I'm like 90% sure I have this right. It's like King is batting cleanup. He's finishing up what he started earlier with the outbreak stuff.
Yeah, they're like little short stories amongst the major theme. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's just really good writing. I love the book for that, and I love King.
Nice. Yeah, me too.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that'll do it for book 1 of The Stand.
Yep.
Yeah, we are still quarantined so if you guys are wondering, nothing has changed in the last hour and a half. I don't know why I said it like that, but yeah, if you're listening to this and coronavirus is still kicking around and you're still holed up from it, be safe. Yeah, be safe and wash your fucking hands. Yeah, I don't know why I put the F-bomb in there, but yeah, any parting thoughts, Tiny?
MOON, that spells quarantine.
Nice.
I know we're not there yet, but
we're not. But I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got nothing.
Cool.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for listening, and stay tuned for upcoming episodes where we talk more about The Stand, and we've got a bunch of stuff coming up, so it's going to be fun to go through this. Let us know what you thought of book 1 of The Stand, and yeah, having said that, long days and pleasant nights.
And may you have twice the number.
Boom. And now, here's a short clip from our Patreon exclusive RSS feed. To hear the full clip and more exclusive Patreon content, go to patreon.com/obsessiveviewer and become a patron at the minimum rate of $1 per month. Thank you and enjoy. Yeah, I've been playing a lot of video games also.
Oh, sweet. Wait, what have you been playing?
So, I've been playing this game called The Outer Worlds. Are you familiar with it?
No.
Okay, so imagine, if you will, I'm not going to go into all that. Basically, it's essentially the developer who makes the Fallout games. It's basically them making Fallout, but like making Fallout in space. It's like a meld between Fallout and Mass Effect, essentially.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It doesn't have that. It's missing something. Like, I don't feel like as absorbed in the world as I would like to be, like I would with Fallout or Mass Effect for that matter. But
yeah,
it's a fun distraction.
Yeah, okay.
Tower Junkies is edited and produced by Matt Hurt and presented by ObsessiveViewer.com. For a full archive of our episodes, go to towerjunkiespod.com/archive. You can also like our Facebook page at facebook.com/towerjunkiespod and follow us on Twitter at towerjunkiespod. If you enjoy the show, please take a couple minutes to leave us a rating and a quick review on Apple Podcasts. This is the easiest way to support what we do, and all it costs is just a little bit of your time. If you'd like to donate to the podcast, you can make a PayPal donation at towerjunkiespod.com/donate or support us on Patreon for recurring donations and access to commentary tracks and B-roll audio recorded exclusively for patrons at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. Every donation goes toward paying the fees to keep the podcast running and is greatly appreciated. For official Obsessive Viewer merch, including shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more, visit our TeePublic store. You can find a link to the store in the show notes of this episode and at obsessiveviewer.com/donate. Or you can simply search for Obsessive Viewer at tpublic.com. For information about our annual live event showcasing short horror films from local filmmakers, check out shocktoberinirvington.com. And for an archive of all our events, as well as news about potential future events, head over to obsessiveviewer.com/live. For more podcast content, you can find our flagship movie and TV review and discussion show, The Obsessive Viewer Podcast, at obsessiveviewer.com and on Twitter at obsessiveviewer. You can also find Anthology, Matt's solo podcast covering The Twilight Zone, and other classic and contemporary science fiction anthology TV shows at anthologypod.com and OV Anthology Pod on Twitter. And finally, check out The Secular Perspective, Tiny's side project podcast, which tackles current events and life's big questions from the perspective of secular hosts Chad and Amanda at thesecularperspective.com. Music for the podcast is provided with permission from Fingers T on YouTube. Additional bumper music is provided courtesy of As Good As It Gets, which can be found at facebook.com/asgoodasitgetsband. Thank you so much for listening. Long days and pleasant nights.
Kitty! Ooh. All right.
Cool.
Good stuff.
That was fun.
That was very fun. And then I started re-listening to Under the Dome, and I'm like halfway through it now, so I'll probably resume The Stand maybe Tuesday next week.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, I'll just be listening as I drive for work and stuff like that. So
okay, cool. And we will reconvene and do this again at some point.
Yeah, good shit, man.
Yeah, good shit. And then I'll talk to you probably sometime if you want to record next week the Dr. Sleep movie review.
Yeah, we should do that.
Yeah, yep. It's been a while. So
did we review the book already?
We did. Yeah.
I thought we did. Okay.
Yeah, I just haven't posted it yet. I'll probably do that tomorrow.
Sweet. Okay.
Yep. All right. Well,
all right, man.
Good times.
Yep. I'll see you later.
Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.